Good morning, everyone, and we're here for the rundown of New Year's Eve celebrations in Adelaide 2020. Last night, South Australia Police were on hand across the state to police all the New Year's Eve activities. They looked a little bit different this year, but nonetheless, police resources were spread across the state. And what I can report is while the traditional New Year's Eve destinations in the city and Victor Harbour and Limestone Coast and Glenelg didn't have their usual celebrations, they still had the crowds, and they were closely monitored by police. 21,000 people in the city to the cricket last night, all well behaved, nothing to report from there. The main crowds were at Henley Street, of course, Glenelg, Henley Beach and Semaphore, as would be expected. This year the policing was a little bit difficult. The planners were confronted with something that is not usual. We had no real major events, but we still had to put police resources across a wide area so people were partying at home. That was greatly assisted with the use of police aircraft, which assisted spotting where the crowds were and directing patrols so we could maximise efficient use of them. We also had our horses out, of course, the general patrols, and also the COVID compliance police were out as well. So what I can report is what I'm hearing from the front line is whilst it was busy, it was reflective of just a busy Saturday night, and there was no real surges anywhere. Most of the venues were full. Most of the venues had lineups which were well controlled and well managed. There were no major disturbances anywhere to report. In terms of figures, I can tell you that there was 78 arrests last night and 15 people reported. That represents a 30% decline from last year, and one of the lowest figures for the last 5 years, which is excellent news. There were 139 expiation notices, mainly given for alcohol in a dry zone or very minor drug possession. Of course, the people that wanted to bring themselves to police attention got that and ended up with an expiation notice. Drink driving was interesting. There was just over 4,700 tests last night, and 4,242 were breath tests, and 461 were drug tests, and that includes mobile and static. So there was over 800 people were stopped by a patrol for a breath test last night, and the results of that were there was 43 drivers tested positive to alcohol and 25 for drugs. That's almost double last year. That doesn't necessarily represent that twice as many people drink driving. One of the reasons could be that if police were not distracted with arrests for disorderly behaviour and other measures, then they're focusing on what they should be, and that's the road. So it doesn't necessarily mean more people drink driving, but it is a fact that more people were caught this year than last. 25 people lost their licence on the spot, and there were 53 vehicles defected and 124 traffic fines given out on top of the drink driving. Some of the readings: a 29-year-old from Henley Beach had a reading of 0.2 at 5 a.m. A 25-year-old from Ottawa registered 0.173, and a 22-year-old from Salisbury recorded 0.13. In terms of COVID compliance and policing, there were 5 venues that were spoken to in an educative way and a caution. They thought they were doing the right thing. Once they were spoken to, they just quickly adjusted and it was fine. There was only one COVID expiation issued for $1,000. That was a teenager down Christie's Way who decided to have a party and got out of hand. So the numbers were far in excess of what was permitted, and he was issued an expiation notice. The only disappointing thing overnight was there were 3 police assaulted. 2 were at Glenelg, and that scuffle resulted in one police officer being kicked and the other one dragged to the ground by their hair, and that person, the offenders, were arrested. Also at Kingswood, a graffiti artist tried to graffiti a high school, and in the course of the arrest he bit the arm of one of the police officers, and that person was arrested. That's probably a succinct wrap-up of what was an uneventful night in terms of New Year's Eve. Senior officers are telling me it was just another Saturday night, really, even though it was a New Year's Eve, and there was nothing to see.
How were you monitoring illegal fireworks? Because everyone's reported hearing a lot of it. You know, is there any way that you can monitor that sort of thing?
Well, it's interesting because the call centre was really busy with calls. A lot of that was COVID questions. A lot of that was noisy parties and fireworks. You really rely on people's goodwill for fireworks. The reality is they're going to have fireworks for New Year's Eve. The good news was they didn't start a bushfire. And to be honest, that's really the main concern. They've had their fireworks, they got their 5 minutes, and we move on.
There was a fire at Lockleys, I think Linear Park, that was started by illegal fireworks. I mean, it's a pretty dangerous situation to be in. Not a bushfire, but still it could have
absolutely.
got much worse.
Absolutely.
Just how disappointing is it that people haven't heeded that warning? And what can you tell us about that incident at Lockleys?
I can't tell you much more about that other than it was extinguished quickly. But the thing about the fireworks is the fires and the accidental lighting is one thing, but also the injuries. Some of those fireworks are quite powerful, and the children that are usually the ones responsible. The most tragic thing about that is that you could lose a finger or a limb or something over what's just a firework, really. They're explosives. At the end of the day, they are explosives. So yeah, it's disappointing that people use firearms illegally. We can live with that, but if they use them irresponsibly, that's worse. So I think at the end of the night, we had a small fire at Lockleys, but there were no bushfires, there were no injuries that I'm aware of, and New Year's has passed.
There was also, there must be some concern about, and that's a small number, but still a number of police officers injured just while they were trying to do their jobs. We just heard a story about one of the Channel journalists being attacked in Glenelg. I think that was part of that same incident where one of your officers was injured. Oh, they said yes. Okay. So the concern about police officers just trying to do their job and still being attacked, while they're doing that.
Yeah, look, of course that's a concern, but not just for police officers, for ambulance and for our firefighting comrades, of course. But when you have the number of people that we had out last night, and given it's New Year's Eve, it's not acceptable that 3 police officers were assaulted in the manner that they were assaulted. But it's a low number compared to what could have happened. And none of those injuries are going to be severe or lasting.
Is there any sort of idea about, in terms of the injuries, in terms of the assaults, obviously you think that alcohol was involved. Have these people been drug tested? Have they been alcohol tested, that kind of thing?
I don't know the particular facts of these assaults other than in general what I've just relayed to you. Are they going to be drug tested or alcohol tested? Within the limitations of the law, if they're in a vehicle, yes they will, if they've got the power to do that. If they don't, they'll be alcohol tested when they're in the cells. That's a different custody management issue. So one way or another, maybe there's no power to drug or alcohol test someone who assaults a police officer, but depending on what the circumstances is, there might be a way.
Just back on the fireworks, there was also an incident on Goodger Street, pretty populated area, lots of people around in the city. It's a pretty dangerous situation. What else can you tell us about that situation on Goodger Street?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of the Goodger Street situation, but that seems a ridiculous use of fireworks and terrible judgment if someone's letting off fireworks in an uncontrolled and unmanaged manner in a public place.
And just taking away resources that could be used elsewhere?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you've got a crowded place at Gouger Street and you're letting off fireworks, it's a terribly silly thing to do, because the police response is not going to assume fireworks. If people are reporting hearing fireworks or shots or whatever, it sets up the potential for a dangerous situation. So no, we wouldn't be pleased about that.
Just on a different topic, to borders now, do we have a figure on how many people are trying to cross the border before the hard border closure came in the other night?
I'm sorry, I'm not up with the COVID. My main job is business as usual, thankfully, but the COVID situation is fully briefed with another Assistant Commissioner.
Can I just go back on?
Oh, no,
That's right. Just back to fireworks. Do we have any sort of figures on how many firework-related call-outs there were last night to incidents around the place?
No, and I sat with the call centre this morning before I came here. The issue will be, it will be recorded as something else, as a general disturbance. It's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to itemise fireworks. But there were calls for fireworks, calls for noisy parties, the usual.
Aside from the legal fireworks, there were also fireworks, legal fireworks in several places, including Victor Harbour. We've heard there are about 5,000 people down there watching the fireworks. Are police concerned about that number of people gathering at Victor Harbour to watch those fireworks?
No, the concern will be, that would have been anticipated, but that was resourced appropriately. The concern is that they're complying with COVID. And if they're doing that, which they were, I'm told, then no, they can enjoy New Year's Eve. It's within the limits that's allowed for what we're doing in South Australia. We're fine with that.
Last ones, everybody.
There was a car accident illustrated at Henley Beach.
Yes.
A serious accident, a cyclist involved. We understand a car might have crossed onto the wrong side of the road and hit the cyclist. What can you tell us about that accident?
I can tell you that unfortunately the cyclist has died, and that's the first fatality for 2021. It's really early in that crash. It happened, I think, just after 7. So Seaview Road in the vicinity of Marlborough Street is closed off, and people should avoid that. As to the facts and circumstances, that will come out later once the investigators have had a chance to do their job. So that's all I can tell you about that.
It's obviously, just one more. It's obviously a really tragic way for a family to have to start the new year. What's your message to people about keeping safe on the road? I mean, it's a really busy time at the moment. Lots of people out. What's your message to people? And you know, this is a real family. This has happened to a real family.
It's a terrible thing for anyone on any day. Here we are on the 1st of January, and we have someone killed already. I would anticipate that there would be more traffic on the roads because people can't go interstate. They're going to be travelling more, and therefore there should be more vigilance and more patience. As simple as that. When I had a look at the statistics from last year's fatalities, the thing that's really obvious is it's not that hard. If you just drive and concentrate on driving with your seatbelt on and don't speed, you don't die. It's simple.
You mentioned venues last night were full. We've got footage of a couple of nightclubs where the dance floor is completely packed. Is that legal? What is the situation? They had signs up saying no dancing, but people were clearly dancing. What is the issue?
The COVID compliance people obviously won't see everything. If you've got something where there might have been a potential breach, we'd be interested in that. Certainly, if they're not complying with social distancing and they don't have a management plan, then our COVID compliance would be very interested in that.
Is there a situation on New Year's where staff are well and truly outnumbered by revellers? Is it almost impossible that these venues would actually be able to maintain compliance the whole time?
No, because I saw a list of hotels and venues that the COVID compliance team visited, and there was a lot of venues on there, and there was 5 that were given education that responded quickly. 3 of them was just a simple thing, a conversation, and a QR code was put on the wall.
So what were they spoken to about? Too many people inside?
One was there wasn't someone managing the queue. One didn't have the marshal badge on, and the rest was just a QR thing, and it was so no one got fined for it.
It wasn't to do with numbers inside a venue?
No, those ones weren't. And so the list of hotels that I saw, there would have been probably 50 or 60 that they visited last night. That's just one team. and they're all fine, other than the 5, and then the explanation was really minor. If you've got evidence of someone dancing to that extreme, and that's a flagrant breach, we'd be interested in that.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks.